Testing. You can hear me okay? All right. Should we wait a little bit or just go for it? All right. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. So in case you haven't met me in the halls, my name's Rebecca, and I am the moderator for this panel today. So hold with me. Hopefully this goes well. For about the first 15 minutes or so, I'll ask the authors a couple of questions, and then I'll open it to all of you. If you have a question for the author, please raise your hand, and we'll go from there. All right, so we'll just dive right on in and have each of the authors introduce themselves. So I'll just pass the microphone.
Do you want us to say genre, what we do, just our names?
What genre would be perfect?
Okay, great. My name is Erica Anderson Center, and I'm a poet.
Hello, I'm Annie Streit, and I write children's books.
Hi, I'm Sophia Nye, and I write historical, fantasy, and contemporary romances.
Hi, I'm Steve Faramelli. I write thrillers and fiction.
Hello, I'm Matt Lennon. I'm a poet.
Hi, I'm Will Truesdell, and I write fiction. And my current book is a mystery thriller, but also I'm told romance. But
Hi, I'm Andrea Spiess, and I don't actually know how to answer that question because my story is based off of our testimony.
Hi, I'm Curtis O. Crisler, and I write poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, essays, young adult, trying to get in children's, adult. Yeah, and I'm your Indiana Poet Laureate.
Thank you, authors. I think I did that a little loud. Okay, sorry. Well, I guess I'll start with my first question. For the poets, what inspired you or influenced you to go into poetry? And who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'm not speaking for all of the poets here. I didn't choose poetry. I would say that poetry chose me. I believe that there are poetry gods floating among us, and some of us didn't necessarily get to dodge mega traumatic stuff. And I think I've always synthesized situations through storytelling, but very personal. I still remember the first poem that I was like, is this a poem? What is this? Anyway, it was never happy. And I would find that when I would synthesize things through poetry, I could experience joy on the outside. So I got all of the heavy stuff out on the page. So I always say that I didn't choose it. It chose me. So
I like that explanation. Anyone else want to ask that answer? All right. Here you go, Matt.
So poetry, what influenced me? That's different than what inspires me, but what influenced me to do poetry is I like little quick reads to inform somebody of something. And the influence that had me doing that was this lady in pink right here. She was the influence. So I had to write little quips to her to impress her, right? So the influence, the effect that, the push to affect my personal character and behavior to go towards poetry was to influence her to smile towards me.
So mine was a little super to the natural kind of experience because I started writing poetry when I was a young child, but never really thought I didn't pursue being an author until God gave me a story to tell. And one day I touched a whole set of Christian books, of stories, Christian children's books, and I got line after line after line to my book in an hour. I didn't pursue poetry, like you said, it found you. And I knew that this book needed rhyme for the sake of children. I just asked the Lord for the words, and He gave them to me. So my story is a little unique, but who can say they write a whole book in an hour, right? It's divine, so.
I go back to fourth grade when I wrote my first poem, and it was for Black History Month. It was about Jackie Robinson, and my mother helped me with it. And from that point on, there's a trajectory of me writing poetry and getting into this thing where you're writing stuff, and you're writing about your emotions and things like that, but you're not sharing it with anyone. And yeah, when I started sharing it, then it would get weird because, oh, people are going to know who I am and what I'm all about and everything, you know. And it's so funny. You try to impress women. Good that you got the woman. Most times, don't work. But then I just remember after college, I had a 3-ring binder, and it was just full of poems. And I can put it out, just have it around the apartment where me and my other 3 roommates were, and they would never touch it. Never. The only time they wanted a poem was like, hey, man, can you write me a poem about my girlfriend? And, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, how does she look? What does she do? You're trying to find out all this information. And one time we had a friend over, and she has my 3-ring binder, and she's reading it. And I snatch it from her. I was like, what are you doing? You know, I'm going crazy. And she's crying. This is so beautiful. You should share this with the world. In my head, I'm like, do not be looking at my words. What? How dare you look at my inner sanctum and blah, you know, all this stuff. And later on, I got to the point in the 90s where I wanted to publish. And I started taking poetry more seriously. And I was looking at it from two different ways. I was looking at it from the perspective of surrealists who are split between what I was learning, Breton and the French, and the Latino aspect of surrealism. And then I was looking at it from the Black Arts Movement and all the stuff that I was reading outside of that. And I had all that stuff. And then I was starting to just read more. I didn't know my mother had all these books of June Jordan and stuff like that on her bookshelf, and I was just taking stuff from there. And the rest seems to be history in that sense that stuff just happens and comes to you and you write about it. So poetry is my forte, but I do, like I said, write in other genres.
All right. Next question. What advice would you give aspiring authors or poets? Who wants to go first?
So what I would say is, like, how many poets are in here? Every single one of you. You got something to say, right? Anything, even if you're just telling somebody. Okay. Biggest thing is everything you write. Okay. I write about things that irritate me. I write about things that are not. What's at the end of known matter, at the end of our cosmos? Okay? Make that spooky thing where it's like, what is out there? So, the biggest thing is, like she said, write the truth, but write down. Everything can inspire you. If you're mad at somebody about something, that can be a poem. Okay? You don't have to rhyme. You got readers, you got that. But write what's on your heart, what's on your mind, what's in your soul, what's in your spirit. A question. If you question something, that can be a poem. That can inspire you to write something, just a question about something. I was irritated about mankind and its chaos it creates. So I wrote a poem of it. It's called I Am Man. And it's about the chaos mankind creates. You know, so that's something. So when you want to write, one thing is write it down. There's a thing called free verse. It's really cool. And the neat thing is, you don't have to know anything about grammar or anything. You just write it down. It can be all jacked up. People don't care. But that's the one thing. It's like if you want to be a poet or even an author of books or whatever you want to do, just do it. Just write it. Just spill it out. Are you going to publish it? That's up to you. Does it really make a difference? No, it doesn't. Because that word going down on the page, that might be just the mechanics of doing that and saying, there it is. This is what I have to say. Don't write what you think people want to hear. Write what you want to say to them. I think that's the best thing is like be yourself. It is your author voice. The voice of an author. The why you fall in love with an author is their voice. Their voice is created by their experience, their life, everything they've done throughout their whole life. And that's their author voice. That's why you fall in love with authors, because how they write, because they're writing from them, themselves. So that's what, if you want to be an author, you want to be a poet, just write what's important to you. You write everything. If you you're irritated about your coffee you got from Starbucks, darn it, write a poem about it. And then slide it onto the counter next time when they're there. So they know that you're irritated and you put it in rhyme. You got it in verse. It's like, you know, you let them know and give them the these and thous and go all Shakespearean on them if you want to, you know. But yeah, so that's the big thing is in being a poet. I'm not a poet. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I decided to write little quips to this lady in pink. Okay? And I got a book now. I write about stuff that it's called bent mind poetry because it makes you think. I write about stuff that makes you think. Very odd things. But a poet is just anybody that puts something down on paper and, you know, just don't be afraid to do it. If you don't want to publish it, just keep your things written down.
Can I add to that? Definitely, definitely. Read. Good writers are
I had some good advice before I started writing my children's books, and I was told, you don't do this to become a millionaire, you do it because you love it. And the fact that I still wanted to write after hearing that made me realize that I had to get started. So, yeah.
The first thing I want to say is 100,000% yes, read. Absolutely. You can't write if you don't read. And then my second piece of advice is actually something that my creative writing teacher said in one of the college classes I took. And I think about it all the time because it is so true. If you don't follow this rule, you'll know why it's true. Do not let people read your stuff until you're done with it, because it will throw off the entire flow. You will start to doubt yourself because they'll have criticism because everything needs editing. Take care of that yourself first before you present it to someone. The only exception is if you're in like a creative writing club where they know how to offer that constructive criticism without completely beating down your creativity. But don't let friends and family who don't write, don't let them read your stuff till it's done and it's ready to be read.
I was going to say, just along with that, the self-editing is where is why it took me so long to write, was I would write something, then I would reread it, and then I would be like, I could do this or this or this. Just get it out first. It's got to be edited anyway, so it just needs to get out. And just, constantly read in what you want to write in. You know, that would be my advice, because it's crucial. If you want to be a writer in a certain genre, you have to know the genre. So you have to read in it. And that's how I started.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else on this side? Chris.
Just real quick, piggybacking off a lot of the stuff that's been said. They say there's only 7 stories and all we're doing is retelling them. but we're in a library, and you see all those books behind you. The reason there's more than 7 books behind you is because everybody up here has a voice. And our voice is our character and our style. And so if there are only 7 stories, the way we're telling them, each of us are going to have our own viewpoint and access to that to give to you. Someone mentioned the aspect of publishing. When I'm writing for me and what's in my head and what's in my heart and what's in my soul. And I'm writing for that. When you get to the point of publishing, that's another thing in and of itself. So if you want to publish it, great. But if you have to write to get that out of your head, because you have these voices in your head that are saying, write this book, write that book, write this book. And you get that out and you finish it. And it's like, oh, I should share this with other people. There's nothing better than reading and writing. That's how you get to be the voice that you are on the page. Everybody that plays a guitar heard someone else play that guitar before them. And they say, I want to be like Hendrix. I want to be like Stevie Vai. I want to be like Prince. And you start out mimicking and seeing that because you're reading other people who are doing that. Then it's like, where's my voice? And you come into your voice. So you have a voice. How does your voice look and sound on the page is a really important thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, authors. All right, I'm going to open it to the audience to ask questions. So who would like to go first from the audience if you have a question for the authors? Okay.
For Sophia, I know you said that you write contemporary romance, and I'm currently working on writing my book for my thesis, and it's a romance. So I was curious, like, I know there's a lot of tropes in romance. Do you tend to like try to challenge those or lean into them more, I guess?
It depends on the trope. I think for contemporary, I lean into them a lot more. For the historical, I think it's way more fun to flip them because people don't expect it, you know? Like the heroine rescuing the hero, and it's just more fun. But yeah, for contemporary, I tend to really lean into them, and I will say that the books where I have relied heavily on tropes for outlining and brainstorming, where I started with, I want this, I've never written, like a Beauty and the Beast trope, and I would really love to try that. That's the most fun I have with books because it's kind of like a writing prompt, and I find that the more I keep to the trope, the more fun I actually have working on it. So.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? All right. You're close. I'm going to bring you the microphone.
I don't need to. Okay, sure. Let's do it. I guess piggybacking on that idea of tropes or form or genre or, depending on who you are, is that something that, I guess, how do you wrestle with that or cling on to that as a structure, right? So if you're writing a children's book, for instance, are there things that you're like, all right, I have this idea of, somebody who's afraid of a spider, and I'm going to tell this story. Like, does the idea come first, or is it I'm going to tell a fairy tale first, and then how do you wrestle that with that once you're in it, or mystery, or whatever it happens to be? Like, how does a genre or form, maybe if you're a poet, like influence what you're doing?
All right.
I never started with the genre in mind first. I had an impulse. I had a situation that I observed, and I went, maybe there's a story behind that. And I start fiddling with it until I get somewhere. The current book, The Phantom Bugatti, started because I was in Cleveland working for the Art Museum, and they had an exhibition about the Bugattis. Now, I don't know if anyone here knows who they are, but it was an incredibly talented artistic family from in Europe, in France for the most part. And there's a great family story there, but it was the cars that were designed by Ettore Bugatti that really caught my fancy. And I started on this idea, and then I was driving from Cleveland over to Illinois with relatives, and I saw a billboard out on the interstate that said Auburn Auto Museum. And I said, I need to check that out. So I came and I was knocked out by your beautiful museum here and learned all I could about the Auburns, Cords, Duesenbergs. And I thought to myself, wow, they're almost like the Bugatti of America. But nobody knows what that is unless you know who the Bugattis are. And so I came up with an idea that was basically around how many here have heard of a barn find, which is an old car discovered in someone's barn that then gets restored. It's a very popular subject in certain circles, Jay Leno especially. But so I got this idea, well, what would happen if I, who know nothing about restoring a car, was suddenly had my possession of a great classic car? And of course I chose Bugatti. And I had to put it somewhere and build a story around it. And I put it in a villa. I'd never been there. I just researched it. And then eventually came here and checked it out. But I never really started with the idea of a genre. I just wanted to tell a darn good story and keep them involved. And then it became a mystery because they want to find out how the car got there in the first place. And it opens up all kinds of questions. So there's a small town story about it and romance. There is the mystery of finding out about it, and it gets answered, but it's in history that it's answered, that rises up. And so it's also a history fiction. And if you look it up on Amazon, you're going to see that some people call it a mystery romance, some call it a historical mystery, and then some people just call it adult fiction. So and I never chose any of them except that the mystery was really the thing that pulled it through.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what he said. My idea, the story is about a man-made flu that basically takes over and starts wiping out the world. Now I love, and this was before COVID, I wrote this, so which is like a whole nother thing. But so I loved books like The Stand, that genre, like post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic. But I was walking back from lunch, and I had just read an article about a swine flu that there was a pig antibiotic that wasn't working on pigs or something, and I was like, I thought about it, I was like, what if there was some sort of a flu that we couldn't treat it, and what would happen? And it just started to go from there, and so it was kind of it just happened, and then so I wrote this book, and COVID happened, and it's weird to look back. I had written so many things about people working from home, masks, like all these things that happened, and and so then I was like, I can't finish it. People are gonna think I'm just like capitalizing on COVID or whatever. But I was like, well, it's almost done. I need to finish it. So I just got it out there and I put that in the foreword. I said, well, it is what it is. But yeah, I didn't start out with a specific, and I had problems trying to pigeonhole it into a genre because I was like, it's kind of a thriller, it's kind of post-apocalyptic. So in the end, it's a little bit of magical realism. So in the end, I just said, it's a thriller, I guess, So yeah, and the more I've studied the craft, I think it's, for me at least, hard for me to write in those tropes of genre because I don't like to read it. I like to read just a good story. Yeah, so.
So I think so far from what people have said, I'm the only one that actually writes to market specifically. So I'll speak to that a little bit. I wanted to make writing a business, so I specifically aimed to hit tropes that I enjoy reading. So I started with ones that I had read a lot and genres that I found myself really interested. Like I kept coming back to contemporary, I kept coming back to fantasy, I kept coming back to historical for various reasons. So I started out in the specific genre that had the best market opening, and I started with that and then expanded slowly. And I always write stories that I want to tell. I don't write a story I don't want to tell, but I keep my audience in mind in terms of the trope, but only when I'm editing. If I'm drafting, it has to be my story, it has to be what I want to write, and then I can edit it into oblivion to make sure it fits the trope and everything. Yeah. And then, totally lost my train of thought, but yep, that's kind of how historical, that's what I was gonna say. The way that I kind of blend it together with, outlining and brainstorming and actually writing it and fitting it to market is I have a system that I follow that allows me to pour out all of the creative thought I have before I get more analytical about it, so it's not influencing one way or the other. And I find that for my historicals in particular, just going through actual historical records is incredibly inspiring, and you get, like ideas left and right, so.
In regards to my children's books, after my spinal cord injury, I've been in this wheelchair for almost 20 years now. I did a lot of presentations and speaking engagements to older audiences, and I wanted to find a way to reach children. So my first children's book is called Scooter and his Scoot Scoot, and I would just say it's about me in dog form. So then I go into schools and talk to the children and just get in front of them and try to make them more comfortable around somebody with a disability.
All right. Any other questions from the audience?
Talked about you've got a way to kind of just get creativity, all the ideas out. Like, what is that? What does that? How does that work? What is that?
So I will give you the short version, but I'm actually turning that into like a 9-week class that I'm going to teach. So there's a lot to unpack there. But in briefly, I follow the Save the Cat outlining method. And I also use, it's called Romancing the Beat because it hits all of the major points that you need to convince readers of a romance that's unfolding. And those are both books that you could read that would be excellent starting points. And then just when I get started, I create this document that I call a spark sheet. And I just write everything I know about what I want to write in there. And I mean, it can be like, I want the heroine to have purple hair because that's awesome. Like literally anything. Anything that you know about the story, from plot to character to setting, all of it. And then I have like the outline that I'm working from of the major beats that I want to hit. And I have an outline sheet that I made that I fill in to create the characters, because every story is really about characters, right? And the best stories are the ones that have characters that grab you. So I always start by creating really detailed character arcs and backstories, and then I pull from that and kind of fill in, plot things around. And you kind of go one and then the other. So you brainstorm more, outline more, brainstorm, and then it just writes itself. Is that helpful? Okay. Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Exactly. Yes, just literally anything.
I'll just add, I did Save the Cat also for my outline. It's great. I mean, there's a novel one and there's also for screenplays, so it's really, yeah, you really can. If you want to sell books, I guess, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm assuming you've done quite well because of, if you're following tropes and yeah, so. Okay.
Okay, so, like the contrast that a little bit with my poetry, I'm a prancer. So, my poem, depending on the content, what I'm writing about, my attitude, I will pick whatever form that poem's gonna come into. It could be a trial-up, it could be whatever. Whatever that form, because I prance, I'm a discovery writer. 100%. You can ask her, she deals with the crud. But I'm a 100% a prancer. So it's a little bit different. Outliners, I respect them because they can outline I can't outline to save my life. So mine, I pick no genre. I just, I have a general area that I want. But mine is totally done by inspiration, an individual inspiration to write a certain thing about a certain thing. And I just go with it. And then it forms itself. And it'll form into whatever form of poem, type of poem, that it will take to convey the message I'm trying to convey. I won't. So it's a little contrast to how she, many are outliners, which is great because it's, and you got to with what she's doing and what they're doing, and authors of, historical fiction, romance, and all that. You got to do that, otherwise you will get lost in your story.
Okay, looks like Will has something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to dovetail on that. And to go back to the original question, I started out as a playwright, and one of the things you learn as a playwright is that you've got a through line, and that you got to follow that through line that relates to your theme and really what you want to express. But then the most important thing is to not get in the way of your own creativity. And I can't emphasize that enough, because there are so many things that get in the way that, you find yourself, you get into self-doubting, you get tied up into things like grammar and stuff like that, which is important. Thank God we got Grammarly now, so we don't have to worry about it so much. But when you talk about the difference between his writing and mine is that mine is long form. And so I have that creativity, and I honestly did not outline this book. It just kind of started pouring out of me step by step. And indeed, I had to go, at some point, really refine the structure eventually. But I would say that came next. Just don't get in the way of yourself.
And some people think there's like, I don't know, 5 different ways to write or something, or I don't know. But everybody has a different way they process writing and how they start out. The first thing is the idea, a smell, a line, you hear somebody say something, and it takes you to the page. What that becomes forms itself. It informs itself too, in the sense of being a poem, in the sense of being a story, in the sense of being a drama piece or a creative nonfiction. If it's by someone who's probably 18 and under, or 15 to 18, it's probably young adult, And so if you have an editor is kind of going to guide you to the market aspects of these things too. But what we're seeing here, this seems to fall into these, parameters or these genres. And I realize a lot of my students, when I'm teaching fiction, they think fiction is fantasy. And it's like fantasy is a genre within fiction. There's horror, there's gothic, there's all these different aspects to that as well as that. And I also tell them, you have to think about your story. Luke Skywalker is a coming-of-age story. Place him in Iowa, the same story is there. But now you have the parameters of the environment that you're talking about in Iowa that is not in the galaxy far, far away anymore. So your stuff is going to, your data dumping when you first get it out onto the page, and then you're molding that into something. And the way I look at it is like when you're making a bust and someone has this clay and it's just a big old thing of clay. You're like, okay, I know I'm gonna make a bust. Now you make the head and you make the neck and the shoulders, and it's starting to form into something. And then it's the details, how the eye's gonna look, how do you do the eyes, how do you do the mouth and the ears. And sometimes you're doing that and you're like, this is all messed up, and you take it out. And as you're writing something and you've written a novel and you find that, it's in first person. It should be in third person. And you've written this whole novel, and it's not that you can just change it to third person. You have to go with all the things that third person brings with it, and those veers that go off too. So I always tell people writing is a pain in the ass. because it's tedious. Just thinking, I've written the novel, it's in first person. I've written a novel, right? Now I know it has to be in third person. So now I have to go back. And so it's just time consuming. Everyone sees the book and they're like, oh, you have a book. And it's like beautiful. But they don't know how long you took to write the book and what you went through and what your spouse and your kids and your friends and everybody like, yeah, yeah. And it's like, oh, yeah, yeah. But it's just, and there's nothing else. You're the purveyor of all of that. It's such a lonely thing to write. When you're writing, you're not, it's, hey, help me out, help me. And we talk about, well, we're addressing the ancestors that came before us, the people who came before us, and, like Angela was talking about and things of that nature. And that's beautiful, but they're just standing there looking, so what are you going to do now? What are you going to do with this history that we've given you? So it's you and you figuring out how to make that clay into something that's going to be presentable.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely.
So the other thing that I want to make sure gets said is don't get obsessed with the beginning. Don't get worried about how you're going to start it. Like if you're trying to outline and it's not going, there's nothing wrong. I've done it before. Just write. And as you need to, go back to the outline as it helps. If it's not helping, don't do it, because your story isn't done till it's edited. And so you can write whatever, and I have rewritten like 20% of a book because I was like, this is not the trope I was trying to write. It happens. And so don't get worried about getting started. Just do whatever you need to do to get words on the page. You can always fix it in editing. And you honestly, I never write the first or the last chapter until I read the rest of the book from start to finish, because then you know how to bookend it, So don't get too caught up on it.
All right. Thank you so much, authors. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Is there anybody in the audience who has a question for the authors? All right.
So in terms of characters, is there any special process that you guys take in creating them, or do things kind of more or less fall into place as the story needs them? Like, for Sophie, like if you need a princess, does the princess just exist now and you build her from there, or do you build who she was up until what she is now?
Thank you. Who's going? Annie.
With my children's books, I have 5. And of course, I'm a dog lover. And I know dogs really, it's a way to connect with kids. So all of my characters are dogs. And each of my books focuses on something. I have one about bullying. I have one about adoption and fostering. So they each have their different kind of themes. But I really wanted to do the dogs as a way to catch the eye of the kids and really grab their attention.
Okay. For my process, it kind of depends. Like if I wanted a princess, it would be a historical or a fantasy. So if it was a historical, I try to find actual historical figures and then give them children that they didn't have, because that's fun. I mean, yeah. But how I generally start is, if it's on my spark sheet, like I like the purple hair, like that tells me something about that character. Why is her hair purple, right? You start asking questions. So if you have a starting point, ask questions about why that's your starting point, and you'll get there. If I don't have anything at all, any idea, but I have, like, let's say I have a hero and he needs a heroine, right? Why? Why is that heroine the match for that hero? Like, how are they countering each other? How are they working towards becoming better because of each other, right? Like, so the relationship kind of keys me in on some qualities. And then the last thing that I do after I have all of my other information that I know about them is I say, what do they want? what are they willing to lose to get it, and what is getting in the way of them having it right now. And if you have those three things, you can just start writing, and you can get to know your characters better as you write them. And then you can go back and make sure that the way they end up is the completed arc of the way that they started.
For me, it's a lot of, I take a lot of, sometimes I say, am I writing a journal or am I writing a novel? You know, because it's a lot of people that have had influences in my life, and I'm like, okay, well, they would be this character, and I kind of base it off of that. And then also, if somebody's made me mad, they're going to end up as a bad person, or they might die. So, and it's kind of a way to just really get it out off your chest, you know, just like, I mean, it's not the exact person, but like I will throw in little pieces of like, oh, I hate that person, so they become this character, and then you're like, oh, let's do this to them, let's make it worse, you know, like, so it's kind of a way to just, I don't know, self-heal, I guess, but yeah.
This is an interesting group. There seems to be a lot of angst in these books. I would add something that's a little bit, that hasn't really been spoken to, and it really comes from my playwriting background, is your characters need to help drive that storyline. Don't throw them in there just for color. They need to have some point, even if it's a very small point. They need to be in there for a reason. And what she was saying about her characters, those work good for your antagonist and your protagonist. But if you're writing a novel, you've got to encounter a lot of other characters to really fill it out in a way that it becomes a novel. And for those characters, I would say tap into your own experience, because it's hard to just totally make up a character from scratch, from your own imagination. It's easier to start with somebody you've seen somewhere that has maybe some of the characteristics that make them unique and different, that fit what their drive is and their purpose in that story. So I used to think that characters were hard to come up with, but then when I realized that they have to come out of that thing that's driving the whole train there, and then find something in your own world, write what you know from where you are to help you build those in a realistic way.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at it, every character is out there in the world right now. Really, Johnny might be your antagonist in your story, because you're like, and he always picked on you and all that, you know, and you know, so just like you said, you know, draw on that. There's people out in the world that you can sit there, you can draw on that experience, you know, just dealing with people to help you build your characters, you know, and you know, there's other aspects to it, as they spoke about. And the other thing is, you know what, protagonist doesn't always win. They can lose. Yeah. And we can love the antagonist. So.
That's called a tragedy.
I would say, going back to like who outlined, there's people who are prancers, there's people who are, like Stephen King and the guy who did he was co-author of the Left Behind series, and they're by the seat of their pantsers. They're pantsers, and what a pantser does mostly, you have this in outlining too, to a certain extent, as you were saying, but most pantsers are organic, so you're putting your protagonist in a situation, and how do they react to the situation. But if I feel if your protagonist is not three-dimensional, then they haven't filled out yet for them to be able to react to the situations that they're in. And so when they become three-dimensional, you see them walking through. That's Jimmy, you know, and they are people. Everything is an amalgamation of your life. So our main characters, our antagonists, our protagonists are people. That's my best friend. That's the teacher. That's the person at Starbucks I didn't like. And they're all that thing, right? And you put them in that situation, and now you're building tension of, oh, I put them in a galaxy far, far away, so now we're going to be in sci-fi or fantasy, or I put them in a realistic aspect of they're down the street here in Auburn or wherever. And now, why are they reacting like they are? It's always the editorial questions, the whys, the hows, all that, because it could be as simple as, I just want to get out, I'm the protagonist, I want to get out that door. And if I just walk out of that door, the story's over. But if I get up and I'm walking and you trip me, now I put some tension in there. Now what do we do with that? Do I just get up and just run to the door now? Or do I turn around and confront you? If I turn around and confront you, now how do I build that? And it's always these little, I call them speed bumps, or some people say a wall. People think, oh, you only get to one of those. You get to zillions of those, especially a novel. You always have a speed, I say it's a speed bump because you have to slow down, go over it slowly, speed back up, till you get to the next speed bump. And the same thing, and there's all these speed bumps that are the up and down of what the character is going through. And all you're doing is just building that character around that. Sometimes they come out as good. Most times these days you're seeing a lot of anti-heroes. It's like, well, they have, in the end, it's kind of like the old spaghetti westerns. The guy comes in, he saves the women in the town because they're getting used and all this stuff, and all you hear is, what was his name? And it's like, you don't know, but he helped everybody. He's like,
I don't know if I want to add, but I will say the character development part of my story was the easiest part because my two main characters was my daughter Kenzie and Jesus, and I know them both pretty well. So there is something to be said for inspiration.
All right, so this was a great panel. I feel sad closing it, but all of these wonderful authors will be around the fair at their table. If you have any questions for them on your mind, please stop by, speak with them, ask for advice, have some fun. We have food trucks because it's getting close to lunchtime, so FYI. And then I'm going to close. Thank you so much for coming and enjoy the fair.
Yeah.